You gonna let me drive the Chevy?
Yep. Let you see what a good ride feels like.
What about the belt buckle?
If you can top me, the buckle's yours.
I am now performing the task the Germans refer to as Schrappen Sie Schmutz. There are few jobs in restoring old cars more humble, yet more completely satisfying than scraping the crud off of car parts. In fact, I believe this country and the entire world would be a better place to live today if from the baby boomer generation on down to the one being born this very minute had been encouraged, and if not willingly done so, then enforced to get off their lazy Heinezittas, go out to the garage, grab a scraper, and schrappen Sie Schmutz for an hour every day. So that takes care of everything that goes under the hood in the 66 pickup there behind it, and also the 48 Chevy in my shed at home. Just did it all at once since I'm doing 2 projects at once. And then you saw me just touching up the inside of the engine bay. Make that look a little better when we drop the engine back in. So on we go. Now, a couple Saturdays ago, I took this head to a friend of mine, an older friend of mine back home. He's about 70 years old, and he's been working on cars his whole life. But part of his automotive shop, part of his business was rebuilding heads. He did a whole lot of that, a lot of heads through the course of his life. And I called and asked if he wouldn't mind if I'd bring this head and I would join him for that Saturday morning in relearning the process that he does to cylinder heads, because it's been about 20 years since I did any of the machining work myself. So what we did, we cleaned combustion chamber, we magnafluxed all the cylinder, all the combustion chambers, made sure we had no cracks, everything was great. We checked out the valve guides. They were all kind of, well, all the intakes were right at the outer limits of the spec. They were technically okay. All the exhaust, however, were pretty much over the outer limits of the tolerance. So we ended up knurling all the valve guides, which, you know, it's like running a drill bit through there, but it raises a spiral. It looks kind of like a thread down inside the valve guide, and that just tightens that up. We did that. We ground the seats. He did more than I, but I helped on a couple. And he got that done like only a pro can. Then the intake valves, we reground those. The exhaust valves, the stems had worn down too much. They were too small according to the specs there, and so I'm replacing all the exhaust valves. Now everything is machined nice and true, but he recommended I still lap the valves and break them into each other. So I'm just going to be using fine lapping compound. Since I know everything, you know, I don't need to clean anything up as far as the seat and the valve faces, but I just need to fine-tune them into each other. So that's what I'm going to be doing. So where I'm going to begin, I've got motor oil. Just put some of that on the valve stem and drop her in. That valve guide feels real good. They were loose when we first took it apart. Just a little bit of the lapping compound, spread her around on the seat. I'm making a mess of this. Down. Take our lapping tool. And try to make a fire. Now you can see, I may need more light here. I could see it was lapped. You see that 1/16 of an inch line close to the bottom of the seat there. Not quite in the center. That's where it's mating with the seat. And we just look for a consistency all the way around there. using my ears to listen when it gets quiet. Did you notice it just got quiet? Okay, now listen close. Got nice and quiet. I'm going to turn it, lift it up and turn it. Got nice and quiet, lift it up and turn it. Let's check it out. And that is a good looking seat, or a good looking valve face. Now, as you can imagine, you don't want any of that lapping compound left inside the valve stem guides. I'm going to use Gojo type hand soap. This is Cherry Bomb it's got pumice in it. And I'm using a bore brush and I'm getting those valve guides nice and clean. And once I'm done with this, I will haul it back to work, put it in the wash cabinet, get it nice and clean, and then I'll bring it back and we'll rebuild it. At this point, the head and the valves are as clean as I can make them. We checked the springs and they were good, but if anything, just a tiny bit short, collapsed just a little bit. So I'm going to put spacers under each spring. And that's as simple as doing this. There is a spring side to these spacers. Okay, before I begin assembling, I have squirted oil inside the exhaust valve rotator caps. This is an exhaust valve. The intake just has a plain old one-piece solid cap. The exhaust actually rotates, so there's little bearings in there. And a dropper. But you need to be sure to get oil. You can put them in a tub of oil and soak them that way, or I just squirt it in. Okay, so I'm going to put a little motor oil on the valve stem, get that nice and slick. Get my valve stem seal and get that started on there. Make sure that seal is nice and straight, it's not twisted. And putting it on there, that'll hold the valve up. It won't slide back out on you. Now the spring and the cap. And get our valve spring compressor. And then there are little keepers in there. Looks like I need to adjust my compressor down a little. Just got to get it till those keepers slide into place. There we go. Now I'll release the clamp and the valve is held in place. And then just for fun, I take my little soft-faced mechanics hammer, tap on it, make sure everything is jiggled into place, let's say. Just make sure everything's in place, nothing's going to fly apart. Oil the valve. Seal. Make sure it's straight. Spring in the cap. My clamp on there. Clamp it down. Keepers on. They're in. Release the tension. Up it comes. Tap it with a hammer. Looking good. So last night my camera decided to pull a Sergeant Schultz. It saw nothing and it heard nothing. So went ahead and finished installing the valves. Got them all in place. The head's ready to go back on. Two more tasks for this video. Number one, got a nice big old crack in the exhaust manifold. We're going to weld that up, I hope. And then I need to finish painting all of the Alpine green engine parts, all the tin that goes back on the engine. So I've been diligently cleaning all the engine pieces that are going to get to be Alpine green, as well as the block and the head, and just have a few thoughts on what I'm doing. If you want to do it a different way, by all means. The first thing is cleaning them up. Now, you saw me, I media blasted them. I didn't use sand, I used coal slag, fine coal slag. Okay, so what I did in this case, I put all the parts in the parts washer and let that take off as much grease as it wanted to, and then you saw me media blasting. I got all the remaining rust and paint off. After that, there is still more, always more sludge, bits of gasket on the sealing surfaces, in the deep crevices and parts like this. There's always more junk that I have to scrape out with a pick or use a wire brush, something like that, and get in there good and get that all cleaned out. But you need to do something. If you media blast them, you need to do something to get all that grit out of there. So then I end up taking it to my solvent tank. It's full of mineral spirits, and I wash all the remaining junk out of the inside, get the sealing surfaces all cleaned up, get everything out, and basically I hose it down with mineral spirits and get all that grit out, and then dry it off, blow it out with a blowgun, and it ends up looking like this. Brand new metal. And now obviously I'm not going for a Conqueror's quality restoration here. We're just trying to get this truck running again. But of course, when you're spending the money, you want it to look good. Most of the engine parts look good, free of dents. There's one ding on the valve cover here. I'm going to get that out. The flywheel cover has quite a few little dings and dents. Of course, it was underneath, close to the road. It's not that bad, really, for this project. It's probably not even worth straightening out, but I might knock the worst ones out, paint it, and that's all it'll ever need. So let's get this one real quick. You can see that dent right there, and I'm just going to use a block of wood as my dolly, so to speak, and my body hammer. There. A little bit there. All right. Then the last thing you want to make sure you do on these pieces, especially on the valve covers, since it has very thin metal on the very perimeter of the piece, you want to make sure that it is straight across from flange to flange. The valve cover itself may angle in, like on small block Chevy valve covers, they actually are pitched in. And they are very prone to bending, but you want to make sure this surface, these two are lined up. They will get to be angled like this. Now, I'm exaggerating, But as valve covers started to leak, guys would turn down the bolts, and that would suck that metal in, the center in, and really bend those flanges. So you're going to make sure these are straight across, and this looks pretty good. But what you also need to pay attention to is this will be dipped like this. And this one is, it's kind of difficult to see, so there's a little bit of a dip there, just where the bolt was pulling down harder on that metal than the rest of it. So we need to straighten that out. And just get something with a square edge. Could use a piece of steel. Put that in there and flatten it back out. And like I said, valve covers are always the worst. Oil pans, always, this one has extra rigidity stamped into it. The Gen 1 small blocks have usually had an extra strip of metal that you placed in there loose and then put the bolts in. Timing covers, it can bend, but you know, there's a lot of bolts close to each other. They're usually not nearly as bad. This one looks really good. It all depends on what previous owners did, and I don't think this engine has ever been torn apart at all. So everything's in really good shape. Let's get some painting done. Now, if you're wondering, I've been using PPG's Acrylic Clean, which is a wax and grease remover, DX330. And I'm just painting with Duplicolor's ceramic engine enamel. And in this case, it's Alpine Green, same as the Detroit Diesel. This was an original color for this engine. If you watch my 86 GMC video, which I really need to be getting back to that, I showed you the V8 going in that, and I painted it Alpine Green just kind of as a throwback engine from the 60s kind of thing going on there, because I'm weird.
crosswinds can really whip campers around, but it looks like smooth as sailing for Calico.